We are now just 41 hours away from landfall. This right here is Milton. Milton has been going through lots of changes in the last couple of hours, including a weakening of intensity. That might be a little bit misleading, as we are also about 500 miles from estimated landfall here, 200 or 522 miles on the southern route, 593 miles on the northern route, and around 549 miles in the averages of the track from landfall here. But what I mean by this thing being a little bit misleading is the fact that over the last couple of hours, this storm has been going through an eye wall replacement cycle, which essentially means that the old eye wall kind of died off, and we've been waiting to see if this thing will form a new eye wall, which it usually does, but it usually takes a lot longer than it happening right now. And believe it or not, unsurprisingly, actually, with this storm, it seems like this is the Ripley's Believe It or Not hurricane here. But believe it or not, that eye wall appears to have reformed already. We have an awesome tool looking at storms with microwave imagery to kind of look through the clouds and directly at the core of the hurricane. And as you could see earlier, yesterday when we were talking about the storm had a very compact, small core, but you can see right here it disappears and then reappears as a larger core. So essentially, what has happened here is that the smaller eye wall has fizzled, kind of became disorganized as the storm tried to reorganize a new core, and then now it appears that that Milton has finally reformed a new core. And I will say the environment that is left for this storm to go through, which we are about to talk about, is still favorable for tropical activity. So we'll be talking about that, and also talking about the latest information, warnings, and watches with Milton, and also going over what the future strength of the storm or path that it could take. So buckle up. Here we go. We're going to be talking about it. Let's get into it. So as you can see, Milton has been downgraded a little bit to a Category 4 hurricane with 145 mile per hour winds, max wind gusts of 190 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 929 millibars. So the pressures have risen about 30 millibars, and the winds have dropped around 35 miles per hour. But again, this is a little bit misleading, and even the Hurricane Center is noticing this as well. That as that new eye wall forms, we're going to definitely see Milton attempt to re-strengthen here briefly. Again, it's only a brief moment where the environment is still favorable for Milton. So as we go further in time, it will do what we are expecting, which is for it to weaken as it approaches land. Going into tomorrow morning, you can see that it weakens back down to a Category 4. Going into that evening, tomorrow evening, it weakens back into a storm that's kind of what it is right now, maybe a little bit weaker on the max wind gusts there. And then as it approaches Tampa, we are still expecting this thing to weaken down to a weak Category 4 or a mid-grade to strong Category 3 as this thing makes landfall. And again, most of the models are bringing this just north of Tampa, which would be probably the worst case scenario for Tampa, into St. Petersburg or just south of Tampa. So, we don't really have too big of a model spread anymore. And if we come over here to the cone of uncertainty, you can see that it is getting smaller just by a little bit. But, again, it's still pretty large cone for being this close to landfall. So still, you have areas like just north of Cape Coral, Inglewood, Sarasota, Bradenton, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Tampa, Spring Hill, and Hermosa Springs still in the cone of uncertainty. But they did take out Cedar Key, and it does seem like they've taken out Cape Coral, or at least parts of Cape Coral, out of the cone. But I mean, I wouldn't let your guard down. Again, if this thing goes north of Cape Coral, that would be the worst case scenario for you guys. But again, still expecting this thing to stay hurricane strength all the way across the United States. And after it gets back into the Atlantic, it's still going to have 80 mile per hour winds with max wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. So we can only assume that those winds will be present as it crosses Florida here. And if we take off the cone of uncertainty and look at the hurricane warnings, we have had new hurricane warnings be issued. A lot of these watches that were on the eastern coast have been transitioned to warnings. So now we have Cape Coral, Tampa, Spring Hill, Cedar Key, Ocala, the Villages, Orlando, Four Corners, Palm Bay, Daytona Beach, Palm Coast, and even Fruit Cove and St. Augustine are now well in hurricane warnings. We also have a lot more tropical storm warnings as well. Port St. Lucie, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Key West are now in tropical storm warnings. Also, Live Oak, Apalachicola, parts of Gainesville there, and Jacksonville are also in those tropical storm warnings, with tropical storm watches making it all the way up into Georgia and parts of South Carolina due to those kind of gradient winds, a jet streak, you can call it, with the low pressure kind of squeezing up against Milton. That's going to be causing some stronger winds along that boundary as it moves out into the Atlantic, still bringing some storm surge and some stronger winds up there. In terms of the storm surge, not a whole lot has changed, but if you missed some of the last updates, I'll go over it again for you. From Indian Pass to Swanee River, we're talking 1 to 3 feet of storm surge. Yankeetown, that's 3 to 5 feet. Again, storm surge is just how much the ocean will rise in comparison to what it usually is. Yankeetown to Anclote River, 5 to 10 feet, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge there in the Tampa Bay region. Again, if this ends up happening, this will be catastrophic storm surge. So if you guys are in this area and you've been asked to evacuate, you have to do it. If you don't do it, there's a high risk that you're putting your life in serious danger. 6 to 10 feet there from Inglewood to Bonita Beach, 4 to 7 down to Chulosky, 3 to 5 down to Flamingo in the Florida Keys, 1 to 3, 2 to 4 near in the Dry Tortugas. We also have 2 to 4 feet on the eastern coast as well, Sebastian Inlet to the Volusia and Brevard County line, 3 to 5 feet from all the way up to Altamaha Sound, 2 to 4 up to Edisto Beach, and 1 to 3 there towards South Santee River. So a lot of surge is going to be possible on this storm for the western coast. It's obviously going to be that eastern, northeastern component to the winds. It's going to surge that water up onto the coast. But on the eastern side, it's going to be, kind of that eastern to west wind component after the storm goes back into the Atlantic. That's going to be causing some of that storm surge to pile up on the eastern coast as well. In terms of the rainfall totals, we're actually seeing some uptrends here, at least from the National Hurricane Center. GFS has kind of been showing this for a while, but it seems like the averages are starting to shift towards a little bit more of a serious flooding scenario. As you can see, we have 12 to 16 inches north of where landfall is, and also north of Cape Canaveral there as well. Could see some isolated spots of 12 to 16 inches of flood water. Again, that can be life-threatening floods if that happens at a quick enough period. So definitely be watching out for that. In the orange areas, 8 to 12, still significant. 6 to 8 in the kind of lighter orange area in this color here. In the yellows is 4 to 6. All right. And then, getting further south, it gets a lot drier. Getting further north of the yellow, it gets a lot drier as well. But our main corridor of those potential life-threatening flooding waters are going to be kind of, looks like to be a little bit north of Tampa, going up a little bit north of Cape Canaveral there. But again, if we get a little bit of a southern landfall, this little axis of rain is going to shift down into Orlando and Tampa Bay. And if we get, for some reason, a much more south landfall, that's going to bring this flooding rain down even further to the south. So definitely, just to be continuing to stay, looking at the forecast, but this is an important thing to be monitoring, as we could have 16 to 12 to 16 inches of rain could bring enough flooding to flood almost entire cars underwater, depending on how fast that falls. So just be very cautious. The atmospheres and the ground's already saturated out there. Big time flooding definitely seems to be possible. As you can see, the experts are releasing some flooding graphics here. And the greatest flash flood risk is going to be not today, but tomorrow when we're expecting landfall. It's going to be from Tampa to Orlando. We got a high risk. It's a 4 out of 4. Very extreme danger here for some big time floods there in the pink. In the red, it's not as dangerous, but still pretty dangerous there from Jacksonville all the way down to Cape Coral. In the yellow, could see some spotty floods here and there, but it shouldn't get life threatening. Might have some instances, maybe some surprises there. So I would still be aware. And in the green, it's a low chance over there from Savannah, Georgia, all the way down to just to the east of Tallahassee. In terms of aircraft recon, we just had a plane go back into Milton, and they are still kind of finding the pressures, being a little bit higher in the storm. Our latest pass seems to have brought somewhere around 930 millibars. So we're still seeing those millibars start to uptick. But one of the things that I'm noticing here is that we might be seeing on this latest pass a small uptick in the surface winds. So, we'll see. Got to see if that trend continues again. The microwave imagery is starting to show that that core is reorganizing. And so, here over the next couple of hours is when we're going to see Milton potentially really try to strengthen again. So, we'll be monitoring this trend. If it starts to strengthen again, I'll probably issue a live stream a little bit earlier than I've expected to do today. But we do got planes out there, and they are measuring the storm, so that's great news there. In terms of the latest intensity guidance, most of the models don't have this going back up into a Category 5. There's only one that does that. So it looks like even if this core does reorganize, it might struggle to get there. But again, this storm has blown expectations out of the water almost every turn of the track here. And so we're going to definitely be monitoring it. I wouldn't take this with 100% truth, but overall, you can see very clearly a weakening trend going into the future before landfall. Again, we're about 41 hours from landfall, so most models within that time frame have Milton, in a Category 3, potentially maybe a couple of them near Category 4. So that still remains possible. So a couple of different scenarios to watch out for, but the overall messaging here is that it doesn't matter if it's Cat 3 or Cat 4. You're really going to see some significant to catastrophic storm surge impacts, flooding impacts, and potentially widespread power outages from the west coast of Florida all the way into the east coast. All right, in terms of intensity, one of the things we're going to be watching out for these models to see if it kind of got the past right, and it kind of did there. It got really low in pressure, and then now we're going back up in pressure here recently. And then you can see that some of these models are indicating that we could make a small trend back down to lower pressures and maybe a little bit of a stronger storm again. But ultimately, all the models are bringing Milton, pretty much very close to Tampa Bay. This is a common theme, especially with this more northerly track. This is the worst case scenario here. And you can see we have some very strong winds, very significant storm surge will be happening with this scenario. This is pretty late, though. This is around 1 a.m. on Thursday, so it does kind of seem like we might be getting a little bit of a later landfall, at least being indicated on some models. So we got to watch that trend there, because that would be a little bit more impactful with people kind of being asleep as it made landfall. But hopefully most people in the most vulnerable areas are already evacuated. Yeah, this is the HWRF. That's its solution. Definitely weakens until landfall. Could still be a Category 3 at this point. Let's go check out some other models here. Almost the same path here, but a little bit of a weaker storm. And a little bit earlier at around 12 a.m. There for Milton making landfall with wind speeds, getting close to those Category 3 wind speeds. This would most likely be a Category 2 hurricane, though, at least being indicated by this model here. So, definitely still some consistencies in track. The HFAS model is also showing kind of a worst case scenario here for Tampa Bay. Again, these models have been very consistent about bringing this into the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg region with significant storm surge. That's why you did see those mass evacuations yesterday. And still a pretty strong storm, potentially a Category 3 here, making landfall near St. Petersburg with that major storm surge is going to be coming in on that right side of the storm. Again, that could be very catastrophic if you stay behind. But yeah, that's 3 models there at around the same intensity. This one's probably the strongest right now, though, going into the Tampa Bay region. So that really hasn't changed. Let's go to the HFAS B here really quick and see what it's saying. Kind of the same scenario. It seems like St. Petersburg, somewhere around in that area, is where most of the models saying. So, a lot of consistency there. And so definitely be prepared. And again, I can't stress it enough. I know I've said it a couple times already. Be prepared and freaking get out of there if you've been ordered to. And look at this. The GFS is now hopping on board the Tampa train, unfortunately. A little bit further to the south, though, which wouldn't be as impactful for storm surge, but still definitely impactful of a storm there. Still looking like a Tampa impact, or very close to Tampa impact there from the GFS. And then last thing we'll look at is the Euro model to see what it's saying in terms of its landfall. Yeah, it's. I mean, almost every single model is bringing this into the Tampa Bay area, guys. The consistency is actually quite astonishing. Euro's definitely a weaker storm. It usually always is. It's not really a great resolution model for intensity, but just seeing the track, which is what I'm looking for here, shows that we're going to be dealing with most likely a landfall very close to Tampa, if not directly over Tampa, with some very dangerous storm surge being possible. Yeah, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Also noticing a little bit of a clearing there near the eye, a little bit more than what it was, but still kind of a ragged eye right now. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I'm going to be doing another live stream here in a little bit, just depending on what the storm does. Could be a little bit earlier, could be a little bit later. But I do appreciate you guys continuing to come in and trust me with your weather information. I know I try to keep it as straight to the point as possible, without any exaggerations, so that you guys can just get the facts. And you guys supporting me shows me that is something that could be possible in a day and age where there's just so much hype and BS going around. So I do appreciate you guys big time. Before you leave, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on the way out, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.